Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
Strictly for the culture. Brothers and sisters, you have seen the t-shirts, the hats, the hoodies, the mugs in the hands of some of your favorite pro wrestling stars, podcasters, and influencers out there. And now it's time. Visit strictlyfortheculture.ca and you too can be part of the movement. Bigger than sweatshirts and commercial success, Strictly for the Culture aims to build with like-minded people and elevate their position in the world through knowledge, self-love, and a desire to unite. So what are you waiting on? Visit strictlyfortheculture.ca. Do it for the love. Do it for the knowledge. Most importantly, folks, do it strictly for the culture.
You're locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke loves wrestling.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Brothers and sisters, welcome back to episode 6 of Devon and the Duke, a limited podcast series with your main man, Duke Loves Wrestling, and of course, the Hall of Famer himself, one of the most decorated wrestlers of all time, Brother Devon Dudley. How you doing there, Devon?
Good. Not bad. Just waiting to take my daughter to her first gymnastics, and I'm looking forward to it. She loves gymnastics. My wife and I have been promising her that we were going to do it for months.
Watch out now. Do we have the next Simone Biles over there?
I hope so. She doesn't know who she is yet. She's seen her, and every time I tell her about her, because she's only 5. She'll be 6 August 17th. So she's not too familiar with Simone, but I'm going to try to get her really familiar. Once she starts getting into it deep, then I believe she'll start knowing who Simone is.
Oh, wow. 5 years old. I didn't realize your daughter was so young, man. That is amazing. And what a great age there. I mean, she's experiencing so many different things for the first time, and, starting to process what's going on there. My goodness. When I think back to being a young person and flipping channels and interacting with different things, going to different events and what have you, pro wrestling was the thing that I latched onto. So for your daughter to latch onto gymnastics, that's pretty awesome, and hopefully, like we said, it might turn into something where if she sticks with it, sky's the limit for what she can do with that type of background. Like we said, she could be the next Simone Biles, or she could be the next WrestleMania headliner. The sky's the limit for somebody with those types of skills. For you, Devon, when we talk about being a young person and finding something that really has captivated your attention and really made you pay attention and want to be glued to the TV or be at a live event or what have you, if you could name one thing, what was the one thing that really spoke to you as a young person?
Well, pro wrestling did. I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, New York, 56 Sumner Avenue in Brooklyn. And I do remember turning on wrestling at a very early age, back in 1977, I believe it was, and watching the masked superstar who we know now as Bill Eden, that played Axe from Demolition, was going up against Bob Backlund. Well, not going up against him, but he was cutting a promo on Backlund. And, I remember it got me intrigued. I was like, oh my God, these guys want to kill each other. Yeah, this is great. I love it. And then Big John Studd happened to come on the TV, coming down the aisle. He might have been with Bobby Heenan at the time. I don't remember. Or might not have been. Might have been with Blassie. I don't remember. I remember him coming down, and then he was facing Backlund for the first time. And I remember being very nervous for Backlund because I thought, man, this big man, Big John Studd, is going to kill Bob Backlund, and I didn't know anything about pro wrestling at that time. And I just remember about to see this. My grandmother walks in because we were kind of like at a house party, what we call back in the day house party, where the adults bring the kids, of course, and they go and play cards and have a couple of drinks and all of that. So I'm watching the TV. My grandmother comes in the room. She goes, "Okay, Devon, let's go. It's time to go." I was like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "But can I watch this first?" She goes, "What are you watching?" I go, "It's called wrestling." She looked at the TV and she sees them cutting promos. She said, "Oh boy, that stuff is fake. Come on, let's go." Needless to say, 10 years later, not even 10 years, 5 to 6 years later, she's in front of the TV yelling at Roddy Piper. Hulkamania is born, and now front and center, watching wrestling, cheering, booing, doing everything, hating the villains, loving the baby faces. And the same thing she told me was fake. Now she's involved. That was a big thing for me. So pro wrestling definitely was it for me. And then also the Rocky series, Rocky 1, 2, but Rocky 3 really set it apart for me because that's where my character comes from, Mr. T. So I really kind of enjoyed that to the fullest. And anytime Rocky was on TV, whether it was on HBO, or even a cable network at the time called WHT, which at the time was HBO's rival up in New York. I don't know if it was anywhere else, but I remember, watching that, falling in love with Rocky, because again, it came on those two. We had both WHT and HBO. And this is when HBO first came out. So Rocky was coming on both of the cables. And at the time, we were stealing cable. We would, cut the wire of somebody's who was, on the side of the wall in the projects from the window, connected to ours. That's how we took the cable. But everybody did that back in the day. But I watched Rocky 3 religiously to the point where I had Mr. T's character packed. I mean, you couldn't tell me nothing.
All right. Now, you really take me back here, Devon. I am an 80s baby, and I'm fortunate enough to have a pretty long memory. So I want to ask you about something here, because this is interesting. We talk about Mr. T and how huge he was back then. Do you remember Mr. T cereal? Absolutely.
I grandmother got it for me.
Woo! That's what I'm talking about right there, Jack. You know you were big when you have your own cereal, okay? Well, when we talk about Mr. T being big out there, an established brand, a well-known name, literally TV, movies, cartoons, has his own cereal. I mean, how big was Mr. T?
Was almost as big as Michael Jackson was. He was so big back in the day. You couldn't go anywhere without not seeing Mr. T. Mr. T was on every possible thing you could imagine. If Mr. T was on the show, ratings were up. That's how big Mr. T was.
He was truly a pop culture icon, which, even to this day, I mean, Mr. T is a draw. A lot of people may not know this, but at these live events, these meet and greets and what have you, Mr. T can still bring a crowd in. And that's a testament to how important he is to pop culture and his legacy. I mean, goodness gracious, the guy is in the WWE Hall of Fame. That says it all right there. I think they still make action figures out there of Mr. T in addition. So the dude is a big deal. Dude's a real big deal there. And going back to that Mr. T cereal, Devon, even though it was packed with sugar, in retrospect, we know that, but oh my God, that was such a delicious cereal. I have never had a cereal that was that good ever since. I miss it, man. And it's crazy to think that there are certain flavors that you probably will never taste again. But I have such fond memories, man. And again, Mr. T, cartoons, movies, pro wrestling. he was doing music. The guy was anywhere and everywhere, and it was a big deal. Mr. T was the perfect 80s icon. If you want to know what the 1980s was like, look at Mr. T.
Well, kids today, and I use the word kids in terms of the 20-year-olds and even some of the 30-year-olds, cannot really fathom how big the 80s were, how big of a turning point that decade was. I mean, you went from the 70s and 60s to the we don't do anything wrong. You have to go by the book and that's it. You know, you're not going to push the envelope anywhere. You're going to do what we say because it's traditional. And in the 80s, you know, that generation just kicked down the door and said, no, we're not doing this no more. We're going to do what we're going to do things the way we want to do it. And that's going to be it. End of story. And the 80s just changed everything from fashion to music. I mean, it was huge. The 80s was a huge icon. And I was very upset when the 80s was over. And I've said this in countless interviews, especially with music. Rap music was big in the very beginning for me. Loved it. The originality of the artist, things, sounds that we had never heard before being produced. And even I was a heavy metal guy as well because of the environment where I grew up at. I listened to heavy metal as well. So enjoyed a lot of that. And then all of a sudden, you know, from what was it, rap music, heavy metal, R&B, you know, pop music. I thought it was, you know, I loved it. And then the 90s came in and the whole sound changed. And I remember Nirvana coming in, kicking down the door and just going, yep, we're here. And all this other garbage is going out. I was pissed. I was upset.
You and me both, brother. You and me both. And it's ironic because so much that took place in the 80s is still relevant today, including Mr. T. You know, and including Michael Jackson, who still has a lot of the music records and things of that nature there. It was a hell of a time. It was a hell of a time. And I think that we don't speak enough about that decade, but we do speak a lot about some of the things that occurred that are still relevant. So it's one of those interesting things. You hear a lot of folks always talk about the new millennium. You know, they talk about the 2000s. They even talk about the 90s. They talk about the 70s. But there's something about the 1980s where I personally don't hear a lot about that decade explicitly. Again, we hear about specifics, but the decade as a whole, it was a time, man. It was a time and a half. I'm telling you.
I'm not getting racial, but I saw something on Instagram. This guy who was trying to break down why our legendary black pop stars were killed. And the one that I can remember offhand was Michael Jackson, because I was a huge Michael Jackson fan. But he said, you know, Michael had more money than anybody on the earth at the time, more popularity than anybody. He had the Beatles, what was it? The Beatles catalog. He had that. And when they tried to get it back from him, he said no, you know, and that was it. And then if I'm not mistaken, I believe he had stake in Disney too. I can't remember fully, but he had his hands in a lot of stuff and they were trying to get it all back. And what he said was because a black man had all of that power, that they didn't think it was right for him to have that power. And so they ultimately killed him. Whitney Houston tried to get the rights to her music and everything back when she realized that she didn't have it. And he said they ultimately killed her. Prince, same thing. You know, so all the legendary black stars were killed because they were black and they had too much power. Now, people will say, oh, that's garbage or what have you. But it just seems ironic that all of these guys, all of these pop stars who are African-American, who had all this power are now dead. I mean, it's a coincidence? I don't know, but they're gone.
You know, it's a hell of a coincidence if it is a coincidence, but I don't think any of this stuff is far-fetched and not to feed conspiracy theorists or anything like that. But let's not forget, folks, we live in a United States in which, in my lifetime, in Devon's lifetime, a lot of you listening out there in your lifetime, our own president and their administration funded a war that Congress deemed illegal. Funded this war by selling crack cocaine in predominantly black and brown communities. This was a thing that actually happened. It's a fact. So when you think about the quote-unquote war on drugs, and then you look at the fact that our own president, Reagan, his administration, Vice President Bush, who was CIA and all that, the fact that they sanctioned drugs to be sold in specific communities, and they were taking those proceeds and then funding an illegal war, anything is on the table after that. Anything is possible after that. Nothing is far-fetched after that. So, Devon, I don't think that if it's a conspiracy, it may not be that far off. That's all I'll say on that.
I think Wesley Snipes in New Jack City said it best at the end of the movie when he was on trial for what he did. He goes, let's get this straight. You don't see no Uzis being produced in Harlem. We don't have any poppy seeds, where we come from. And it's not the black people that have planes that are flying this garbage into the United States, into the black community. It's far bigger than Nino Brown. And he was right. It's a lot bigger than the biggest drug dealer in the world. It's a lot bigger. And if people don't think that the federal government has anything to do with this, you're crazy.
Well said. Well said. Can't argue with that one at all, man. You mentioned a name. I want to go back to this here because I have a heck of a story about this guy. WWE Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time, Bob Backlund. So you said you grew up watching Bob, and that's pretty cool. He inspired you, helped inspire you to become a pro wrestler. What was it like actually meeting Bob when you finally did?
Well, he was definitely out there, a little crazy. It was kind of like the character that he played on TV, when he came back to the WWE for a second run. I don't think it was too far off from what he really was, but a genuinely great guy. We were in the locker room together when he was managing
Darren Young. He was managing Darren Young at that time.
And I remember one day just sitting down having conversations with him because he gave me a copy of his book, signed it and everything. And he just started telling me about different things, like what was going on during his era, the whole Vince thing when he left because they wanted him to become a bad guy. And how he didn't feel like dropping the title to the Iron Sheik at the time was good. He sat and just told me all of the stories and how, the evil empire of the WWE back then, just some of the stories he told, which I had heard some of them from other people, but it just reinsured everything once Backlund said something. So there are some people that are very credible in this business that, when they say something, you could better believe it's probably the truth.
I agree 100%, and I have a heck of a story that illustrates this. A great friend of the show, Babam, shout out to Babam. He had reached out and said, hey, I met Bob Backlund and we were getting to talking and I told him about your podcast and he's interested. So do you want to have Bob on your show? And I'm like, of course I want to have Bob Backlund on my show. So, Bob gave me the number and I reached out to Bob and we had a very short conversation. It got right to the point. Bob said, yep, I want to come on the show as long as I get to promote my book. And I said, of course, no problem. And he said, okay, well, I want to do it face to face. And I said, well, Bob, this is an audio show, and I usually do it remote because it's just easier. I'm in Boston. Where are you? And he said, well, I'm in Connecticut. I said, yeah, we can do it remote. He said, no, I want to do it face to face. When is the next time you're recording? So I said, well, ironically, tomorrow's my recording day, so I'm going to be at iHeartRadio Studios, and I'll be recording there. So Bob says, perfect. I will meet you there. Just send me the address. And I'm thinking, this guy's pulling my leg or something here. Like, there's no way Bob Backlund is going to show up at the studio in less than 24 hours. Well, sure enough, the next day, I get a call. I'm on my way to the studio, and I get a call. Bob is like, hey, I'm here early. I'm going to stop and grab a bite to eat at this sandwich shop down the street from the studio, so I'll see you there at our agreed-upon time. And I said, well, there it is. And sure enough, Bob was there, and he had his suspenders, and he was doing jumping jacks and push-ups and pull-ups on trees and doing all this stuff before the interview. And we ended up doing the interview, and he was so engaging and entertaining and completely serious at times. And it was legitimately one of the most fascinating experiences I've ever had. But it was crazy to even walk him through the iHeartRadio studios here right outside of Boston. You know, iHeart is the number one radio company in the nation. They have the hip-hop stations, the country music, the talk radio. They got it all. So for some of these folks poking their heads out of their own studios and seeing Bob Backlund just walking through and then going in and recording and having a good time and all this, it was literally nuts. But I'll double down on what you said, Devon. You won't find a person who is more genuine and more honest than Bob Backlund. Like, he legitimately is exactly what you see. That's exactly who he is. And the man has morals. The man has to make sense out of what he's doing. There has to be a reason in order for him to do it. And if he doesn't like it, he's not going to do it. It's just as simple as that. So definitely shout out to Bob Backlund, a great hero, great legend, most importantly, a fantastic human being.
Like I said, he always found time to talk to me, and I was marking out, so to speak. So, he knew it, but he didn't mind sitting down and talking to me. A lot of people, it's Bob Backlund. He's really, he's from the 70s. What would you want to hear from him? A lot.
A lot indeed. I mean, you're talking about a man who legitimately was probably a top guy for 4 or 5 years. I think he was champion for about 5 years in the WWF. Are you kidding me right now? And people have the audacity to ask you, what would you want to talk to that guy about? A lot.
I mean, he took over that long reign of holding the title right after Bruno Sammartino, then Hogan. And then, and then it went on. So, Bob Backlund was a huge deal.
That's a reminder to everybody out there listening, folks. There is no substitute for experience. And if you can't find value in people who at one point were number one in your industry, then there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with them. They're the legend. There's something wrong with you if you can't find value in that. So, again, shout out to Bob Backlund, legitimately one of one, just a fantastic human being there. Speaking of someone who's a fantastic human being, breaking news here, John Cena. It was revealed at the Money in the Bank PLE, John Cena has officially announced his retirement tour. So I want to get your thoughts on this here, Devon, because Devon Dudley is no stranger to John Cena. In fact, you have actually defeated John Cena in a match before.
Oh, yeah, numerous times.
Numerous times. You beat him. He beat you. You and John Cena had a hell of a feud with each other through the years. And, ironically, you've teamed up with each other before. In fact, the last time Devon Dudley and John Cena shared a ring together, you were a tag team with Bubba. So you were a triple team there against the New Day.
Those bastards New Day, they cheated.
You hear that, Kofi? You hear that, Woods? You hear that, Big E? Devon Dudley has a receipt waiting for you here, Jack. Might have happened during the John Cena retirement tour. Poor Big E. I don't know. He's going to have to get cleared for that. But anyway, John Cena is going on his retirement tour, going out on his terms as opposed to being pushed out. John Cena gets to legitimately end his career the way that he wants to end it. What are your thoughts on that, Devon? What are your thoughts on the whole concept there about Mr. John Cena?
Well, I had a great time with John. I basically, had great matches, whether I went over or John, went over on me. It was really cool to actually be able to be in the ring and sharing with him. John was probably one of the most unorthodox guys I think I'd ever been in the ring with. And he'd be the first to tell you that, but he made it work. And you got used to John and how he was in the ring. And of course, over the time, he gotten better over the years. And then his promo skills were just over the top. So John basically was a guy that I really enjoyed getting in the ring with. And I had a lot of fun. Even though our styles were a little different, we were able to make music together. We were able to dance. And there was never any issues. So, sad to see, but everything has to come to an end. A guy once told me everything has an expiration date, whether it be your life, whether it be your job, everything has an expiration date. You just got to know when it's over. I wasn't happy and thrilled when I had to retire after the second run in WWE. I wasn't happy at all. I was kind of forced into it. Because Vince wanted both Dudleys and Bubba wanted to pursue things on his own at that time. So he decided to leave and go venture on his own, which is nothing wrong with that. And I remember begging Vince to, let me be able to do another singles run. And he was like, no, I want the Dudleys. I want them together. I was like, all right, well, I guess that's the end of that. And it just never panned out, but it's one of those things where, being with John in there gave me some confidence when things went wrong with the Reverend Devon character. He basically gave me He gave me life, because we had really good matches. We really tore the house down a lot of times. Whether it was on the show Velocity at the time, which was second to SmackDown, I believe it was, and I forgot what the second show was to Raw, right before Raw. Sunday Night Heat. We did Sunday Night Heat together. I mean, we had great matches. So, I loved working with John. It's going to be sad to see him go, but again, everything has an expiration date, just like it was the Dudleys. Again, I didn't want to leave, but I was kind of forced into it. Sure, I could have went, somewhere else. But my thing was WWE. That's where I wanted to be. I wasn't going to wrestle for anybody else. I had to retire and become a producer. Wasn't ready for it, but, whatever. And as time went on, I grew to love it. When I first started producing, I hated it, but I grew to love it and moved on from there. So I'm sure John, whether it's movies, commercials, he'll find something else. He'll move on, and you'll still hear a lot from John Cena. I'm sure he'll come back and make appearances, not probably in the ring, but just face on the TV. And that's pretty much all you need with John. He doesn't need to go back into the ring and wrestle really anymore. Okay, congratulations to John on a very, very successful and Hall of Fame career. I wish him nothing but the best, and I'm sure that the WWE will not be the only place he finds success. Congratulations, John. God bless you.
There's a website, cagematch.net. So I'm giving a little plug there, cagematch.net. It is a place where you can look up wrestlers, get information about them, height, weight, age, who trained them. In most cases, you have a biography, but you also have their match listings. And although it may not always be 100% accurate, there may be a lot of missing information. throughout the years, whether it be the wrestlers themselves or fans, media folks, people contribute to trying to get the history of each wrestler as accurate as they can. So it's a pretty cool website. They rate matches and all that good stuff too. So once again, shout out to Cage Match. I was looking at your Cage Match, Devon, and I aggregated my search to matches that include you and John Cena. So whether that be tag team matches, one-on-one matches, and exactly how you remember it, you and John, you feuded through the years, including the Reverend Devon character, which is pretty cool to see. You definitely wrestled on Velocity. Remember that TV show and what have you there. So, yeah, there's no question about it. You and John tangled with each other through the years. You feuded through the years, teamed up, the whole 9 yards there. So it's pretty cool to hear you tell the history as you remember it, because that's exactly the way that it has been recorded.
I'm going to be one of those, old timers that's going to sit back and think about everything that we've all accomplished and going to miss it. You don't realize what you got until it's gone. And, not that it's a bad thing, but, we really had a good time back then. And, we all get older. We all have to face it that, we're not going to be able to do what we used to do. We just have memories. And that's our time machine, the memories.
What a quote right there. Oh, my goodness. We've known you as Brother Devon. We've known you as Reverend Devon. I guess we're going to have to know you as Philosopher Devon next. That's a hell of a quote there, brother. My goodness. Over the weekend, WWE, they had a 1-2 punch there. We had the Money in the Bank PLE, which was just fantastic. And NXT, they had their own PLE on Sunday, and it was amazing. Okay, we're talking about Heat Wave. Trick Williams was defeated by All Ego Ethan Page. So congratulations to the new NXT World Champion. That is very, very huge for Ethan Page. And here's a guy who just a few weeks ago was in AEW, floundering. No real direction. Came in with a big buzz because he was coming from TNA, came in with a big buzz, and then it just fizzled out like so many other wrestlers. This talented guy, excellent on the mic, keeps himself in great shape, can get it done in the ring. And somehow, some way, Tony Khan just couldn't figure out anything sensible to do with him. He goes to NXT, and literally in less than 2 months, he becomes the NXT World Champion. And a bigger star than he ever has been in his entire career. What's your take on this here, Devon? This all ego Ethan Page, and really, another man's trash is another man's treasure, right?
Well, yes, and and it could go vice versa. But here's the deal, that's the testament of Triple H. He can find. He's like Heyman. He can find things in people that no one else could find. And, not knocking Tony, but, Tony's got to understand he only plays with certain toys. We like to all say that he only likes to play with certain toys. And when he gets bored, he puts them up on the shelf, and they're on the shelf for a long period of time. Keep them on the shelf. Once they get thrown into the garbage, WWE can either leave them there or pick them up. Eventually, they picked them up, and like you said, they made a star out of him to the point where they gave him the title, and he beat Trick, and congratulations to him. Again, the sky's the limit for that young guy, and I really wish him the best and hope that he reaches heights that are even bigger than that, and I'm sure he will. Again, it's just a testimony to what Triple H can do. Now, there's some people that leave here, even after the Vince scandal, that's going to go to AEW, and that's fine. But in my opinion, they will never reach the level of success that they have reached. And maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe they will, but it's hard to fathom that because of the way Tony is and how he, plays with you for 3 to 4 months and then he puts you on the shelf. It's never consistent. And I don't know whose fault is that in terms of maybe not having the right people around him to be able to notice talent when he has it. But, that's just the way it is. So Triple H picked up on this and made this guy a star, made this kid a star, and congratulations to this kid.
It's funny that you say congratulations to the kid, because certainly Ethan Page is a young man and looks like a young man. But ironically, he's been wrestling for 17 years now. So a lot of experience, despite the fact that he's a young person. In fact, he had a great quote. It took me 17 years to get to the WWE. It took me 6 weeks to become a champion. Wow. Once again, congratulations to All Ego Ethan Page, the NXT World Champion. It's good stuff. On the flip side, Devon, really interesting controversy here. There was a graphic that was put out by AEW. And in the graphic, Chris Jericho is in it. And next to him, it says FTW Champion. Mercedes Moné is in it. Next to her, TBS Champion. Will Ospreay is in it, and they identify the championship that he has. It's interesting because then you have Swerve, who's supposed to be the face of AEW. He's the AEW World Champion, and yet it literally just says Swerve Strickland. That's it. Doesn't identify him as the number one champion in the company. So a lot of people have been arguing back and forth about this. So I want to get your take, Devon. In your opinion, does this seem like a slight at Swerve? I mean, what the hell is Tony Khan thinking with stuff like this?
Well, I'm not really in the company to realize, or I don't really watch the product enough to know why. I mean, I hear rumblings just like everybody else is hearing it, but I can't fathom for the life of me why somebody like him does not get the proper push in the media like everybody else does. Swerve is a phenomenal athlete, has stepped up to the plate, has done tremendous. The people love him. Coming from WWE and not being put in that type of position, now comes AEW, builds himself, and now, they're not using him right. And but they're not promoting him right like they should. I don't get it, nor do I understand it. That's a question for Tony. Unfortunately, I don't think you'll ever get it.
Can't argue with that. I mean, I agree 100%. And it just boggles my mind because AEW was created to be an alternative to the WWE and to compete, right? They were going to deliver on all the things that WWE was not delivering on enough or at all in some cases. And it's just fascinating to me because that lit a fire under WWE and they have never looked back since. It has never been more diverse, especially at the top of the card. Women have never had more matches and being featured more. Being treated like the superstars that they are. The importance, the significance. It's never happened. And it's ironic because even NXT in particular, which is supposed to be the developmental brand, because AEW has dropped the ball, NXT has legitimately become the true alternative to WWE in a lot of ways. And I know that, they're under the WWE banner, but NXT is its own thing, right? It's its own thing. That is the alternative programming that folks wanted, and they're responding strong to it. Because of so much diversity, because of so much inclusion, because women have multiple matches and are main eventing and are drawing the money, NXT legitimately is its own third brand for the WWE. They have a big money contract going over to the CW network. You can't beat it. And I just look at Tony Khan and I shake my head because his inability, and really, I guess you got to call it disinterest, in executing on the diversity and inclusion that he claimed AEW was going to utilize as a focus. This is what has cost him in the pocketbook and really in the perception in the marketplace. For the most part, fans don't want to watch that program because it's nonsense. Undersized people, much of the same looking people. You don't have diversity in any kind of prominent situation there. Even your black world heavyweight champion who earned it, Swerve earned that distinction. You treat him like he's chopped liver. This is what Tony Khan is doing. And again, the fans are just throwing up on it. They're saying, we don't want that. They're getting terrible ratings. You see it in the arenas. People aren't showing up. Meanwhile, WWE can't miss right now, including NXT. So I scratch my head and I look at Tony Khan. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? I mean, Devon, am I missing something here?
I don't think it's you missing something. I think it's Tony that's missing something. And Tony, with all due respect, if you're listening, this is something that not only just we're talking about, but even your diehard fans are talking about. So maybe you should listen to them instead of ignoring them. Because remember, that's the problem that Vince had at one point. It was, oh, this is my way and I'm going to do it my way. And the fans wind up turning on the company. You know, it's only a matter of time before the fans do that with AEW. And I hope they don't. But it's only a matter of time if he doesn't listen to what the fans are saying. Stop listening to the people who write dirt sheets and trying to give you advice when you should be listening to people who have done something in this business and made money, made things happen. You have enough talent in the back, whether it be people talent in the ring or even guys who are retired back there to give you their input on certain things that made money, that's been somewhere, that's done something. But yet it seems like Tony keeps putting his trust and relies on people that have never done anything in this business, never drew a dime, but yet can write a dirt sheet and pretty much say how things go. And that's going to probably be the ultimate demise of his company if he doesn't get a hold of it.
You know, some people hear us talk about this and they say, oh, you're just burying AEW and you want them to fail and all that. That's not the case. It's not the case at all. I've had people from AEW on this show. So, and documented their careers through the years, even before AEW. So it's not the case at all. We want them to succeed. It's just we need Tony Khan as the president, as a person who's writing the storylines and the person who's spending the money and the person who is determining what's being focused on. We just need Tony to smarten up and do the right thing so that this company does survive, so that there is another place where people can go and make a great living for themselves and their families.
They have tremendous talent there in AEW. I mean, tremendous. They're not, in my opinion, they're not like a B roster. You know, they have great people that can actually work and really do things. You got some people that are sitting home that doesn't need to be sitting home. They need to be in storylines and doing things to help that company grow. So got to wake up sometime. If not, it's going to be another WCW all over again.
What's baffling to me is just the fact that at the same time AEW can't seem to get out of its own way, WWE has all of these compelling storylines that literally have people on the edge of their seats, myself included. One of the biggest storylines going right now is this whole feud between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. And it looks like Seth Rollins has been added to the mix as well. McIntyre won the Money in the Bank match, the men's Money in the Bank match, and immediately cashed in during the Seth Rollins versus Damian Priest match and had a good shot. Until CM Punk showed up, interferes again, costs McIntyre the match again. Shout out to Damian Priest. He retained the title. But this is compelling. And then Rollins is pissed off because it's like, hey, wait a second. You know, you not only did you cost him, you cost me too. This is compelling stuff. This is great storytelling. You don't know what's going to happen next, which is the best part. So that means you're going to have to tune in. I mean, they can't miss. What's your take on this whole feud between Punk and McIntyre and now looks like Rollins?
I'm very intrigued on where we're going with it. How is Drew going to get his revenge? I mean, he did the thing on Raw where he came out with Punk over his shoulder, dropped him. You know, the garage door opens and there's Punk all bloody. But there's got to be more to Punk getting his ass kicked and handed to him, because this man keeps screwing Drew over. And, you know, I like to say, man, it's only a matter of time before Drew gets to the point where he's going to literally want to kill him. You know, we always like to say in the wrestling business, I need to be able to work with you, you know. I don't want to hurt you and kill you. I just want to beat you up a little bit. But at this point, I think Drew wants to kill him. Because how much times can he screw Drew over before Drew just goes, you know what? I'm going to come to your house when you're sleeping. I'm going to slit your throat, and then you won't bother me no more.
It's wild. It's wild, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Speaking of which, one of your students, someone from your learning tree, Tama Tonga, he was part of the main event. It was the new Bloodline, led by the self-proclaimed tribal chief, Solo Sikoa, with Tama Tonga and Jacob Fatu having his first WWE match ever. They took on Cody Rhodes, the champion, Kevin Owens, and Randy Orton. And the finish saw Cody Rhodes being pinned by Solo Sikoa. So Devon Dudley, here we go again, more twists and turns. What did you think of the main event here at Money in the Bank?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic. Now, he pins Cody Rhodes, but then what happens when Roman comes back and wants to, you know, get revenge on getting his title back? Now you got the guy who's claiming to be now the tribal chief. Now the old tribal chief is now trying to probably restake his title as being the tribal chief. And now they're both going to be trying to fight for the WWE title. It's going to be very interesting to see how things turn about when Roman comes back. You know, he just lost his dad, you know, Seeker. So I don't know, maybe his time off after WrestleMania got extended to go through the grieving process. But man, when he comes back, that place is going to erupt. And I can't wait. It's almost like when Rhea Ripley came back last night. I was expecting a little bit more last night with Rhea, maybe nutshot Don for, you know, like when she got face to face with him, maybe give him a nut shot. He goes down, Rhea, I'm sorry, you know, holding his balls, you know, and Rhea just looking, you dumb, dirty Don, you know, so I don't know, something stupid like that. But I expected a little bit more out of that. But other than that, I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting. We're just going to have to wait until it's played out to see what happens with Sikoa and Cody Rhodes and the tribal chief, I would like to say, Roman Reigns. We're gonna have to wait for all three of those guys, see how the storyline goes, and you see that's the difference between AEW and WWE.
Absolutely, the big difference between the two, no doubt about it. All right, folks, we have birthday shout out time, and we're gonna kick it off with our main man, Adrian Gomez from Middle Kingdom Wrestling in China. Adrian packed up and moved to China years ago, started his own wrestling promotion. Now it's the #1 pro wrestling promotion in all of China, one of the top pro wrestling promotions in the world. So happy birthday, Adrian Gomez.
Yes, happy birthday, Adrian.
We have one of our young listeners, Sophia G. Now, Sophia, she likes to listen to the show with her dad, Danny G., great friend of the show. The both of them are fantastic New Englanders down there in Rhode Island. So what do you have to say for the young lady herself? I call her Princess Sophia G.
Happy birthday, Sophia. Many more.
Many more indeed. I think that kid, Sophia G., she's going to be a big deal in life, and everyone will know her name someday. So it's pretty cool that one of the first places that she was able to share her thoughts was right here within the Duke Loves Wrestling Network. So good stuff there. Now, Devon, you actually just had a fantastic live meet and greet where you met some local fans down there in Florida, right?
It went really well. I was very happy to meet a lot of the fans. I've been here now like almost back to back. And, I was telling my wife, I was like, I don't know how many fans going to come out because, I've been hitting Florida hard. But yet they're coming out and they're different all the time. I might have seen maybe 2 or 3 that had been running the circuit in Orlando. But there were a lot of fans that were new. They were very, very warm, very inviting. And I thank them very much. I had a great time, and I'll see you guys real soon.
If anyone listening right now has not met Devon Dudley live, you're missing out. So definitely, if you get a chance, you want to check this brother out, the Hall of Famer. You hear him on the show, very engaging, a great time. You heard what Eric Bischoff said about him. Legitimately one of his favorite people to be around because Devon is so warm and friendly and personable and really just a beacon of light. So, Devon, for anyone listening out there, if they want to keep up with you and, more importantly, find out the next live event that you're going to be at, so hopefully they can go and meet you, get an autograph, shake your hand, what's the best way folks can do that?
All right, they can go to my Instagram, Testify Devon. I put everything on there, as well as Testify Devon on Twitter. I will be at 90s Icon in Atlantic City this Saturday. And signing autographs, taking pictures, and hell, I might even run for president. I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody would vote for me, but damn, I can't be as bad as the 2 that we have going at it now.
Yeah, you might have a good chance there, man. With these 2 guys here, you might be the good alternative.
I remember I was in ECW and during the Attitude Era, so, all my skeletons might come out. We don't want that.
Hey, that might actually get you elected. Those skeletons might seal the deal, brother. Let me cut it out here. Duke Loves Wrestling on Facebook, on Twitter, DukeLovesWrestling@gmail.com. Send in your questions, your birthday shout-outs, the whole 9 yards, folks. As you hear, Devon Dudley, he is as candid as he's ever been. So let's get it in. That's right.
All I can say is, without any further ado, oh, my brother, testify.
This is Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Wrestling.